Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. With Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters.
Well, buckle up. We've got a lot to get through in a short period of time, haven't we, Curtis, today? There's been a lot on this week, as we all know only too well.
Definitely, yes, because obviously we've had the budget and we've also had the Car Dealer Used Car Awards. So for a lot of people in the industry, a lot of people listening, that's been one hell of a week, hasn't it?
It certainly has. It certainly has. So we've got a couple of shout outs. The first one is obviously the Used Car Awards, which is the Car Dealer Awards that was on Monday night of this week. So a great event always. The dealers do love this one, don't they?
So looking at the Used Car Dealer Awards, we've only got time for a handful of shout-outs on this one. So starting with Used Car Supermarkets, the winner was HPL Motors, highly commended Car Planet, and Fords of Winsford Car Supermarket. And turning to some of the specific used car dealership awards. So used car dealership 51 to 100 cars, that was won by Greg Mitchell Motors. Over 100 cars was won by First for Cars, and Used Car Dealership Group of the Year, which I know they were absolutely delighted to win this one, was Wayland's Automotive.
Definitely. And the one that they do like to win is Dealer's Dealer, because this is the one that is voted for by the dealers. And this was sponsored by Dealer Kit. And the winner was Craig Walker from Culloden Cars, and highly commended, was a friend of the podcast, Yumi Samani, of Specialist Cars down in Stoke and chair of the IMDA. And alongside that was Scott Sibley of Redgate Lodge. So on the newsletter on Monday morning, we will share a link to the report on this, which gives you the full details of the winners and highly commended winners of the Car Dealer Awards on your news feed on Monday morning. But also today, we'll be sharing shortly the snippet from an interview on Friday with Steve Young, MD of Automotive Consultancy ICDP, and MD of Auto West London, the JQ and Amoda dealership group. So this is a standalone episode that we did manage to grab a bit of time with Steve and got him to sort through his recently published Top 50 European Dealer Group. Mentioned the AM100, and more importantly, we got his take on the this week's budget and what it meant and what his views were in terms of the impact for the automotive sector. So do catch the full interview on your podcast feed from Friday of this week, and we will play a short clip of that shortly.
And on today's pod, we're joined by automotive digital marketing guru Ian Godbold for his latest top tip. And you really won't want to miss this one. It's this week he looks at Wham-ageddon, which is that time of the year after Black Friday as we go into December and consumer attention turns to Christmas planning and things to start and things do generally start to go quiet for car dealers. But Ian's actually come up with a number of top tips in terms of marketing to address that sort of quieter period.
You're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors.
Headlines this week come from Car Dealer AM, Motor Trade News and BBC News. Now, we've got a budget special this week, so the first half of the show will look at the industry reaction to the budget, followed by the rest of the week's headlines in the second half. But to get things underway, here's industry consultant and ICDP Managing Director Steve Young on how he thinks the budget will impact the car retailing sector.
Let's spend a little bit of time on, I mean, it's still early days in terms of digging through the detail of the budget, although we did get a half an hour advance on what Rachel Reeves came out to say, thanks to the OBR. But from your perspective, Steve, in terms of the budget and the impact on automotive retailing sector, how do you think the introduction of pay per mile for EVs from April 2028 will impact EV adoption amongst buyers in the meantime? And probably as a way of as a bit of a follow up there, well, in terms of the additional funding into 29-30 for the electric car grant, will that be a welcome measure as well for dealers at the minute?
Well, I think it's mixed news, I guess, which probably most budgets are when you look back over time. But I think we've talked before on the pod about the confusion that's sown in consumers' minds by sort of flip-flopping government policy, and I think we're seeing some of that now. And unfortunately, the quality of the news reporting, this pod accepted, obviously, is not great. So if you look at it in reality, somebody who's buying an EV now on a 3-year PCP, it'll come to the end of its PCP and someone else is holding on to the residual value risk before they're ever going to be paying any mileage charge. And so there's not any rational reason why you wouldn't buy an EV now if that was what you were planning to do. But inevitably, it's going to sow uncertainty in people's minds. But the fact that there was going to be a tax, and probably a per mile tax on EVs at some point, was absolutely inevitable, because collectively the duties and VAT and so on fuels, 1% of GDP, the chancellors are struggling, looking around for the odd billion here and the odd billion there, hardly going to walk away from 30 billion. So it was absolutely inevitable, regardless of the politics of the government. At some point, it would have to come in, and it will have to double to get back up to the sort of equivalent rates of the combustion engine cars.
I mean, that was something you pointed out a long time ago in one of your blogs, really. It had to come. You could see the deficit of the lost revenue coming from taxation at the pumps. We've had the fuel duty freeze, we've had the 5 pence. That treasury would just, the income was falling, dramatically falling, wasn't it? So it couldn't last, could it?
Yeah, and I think, we obviously the British press focuses mainly on British news, but in 10 days time, 12 days time, we're going to have the announcement out of the EU about what's happening about the 2035 ban, and it seems pretty much certain that's going to be relaxed to allow hybrids and potentially biofuels and other workarounds to continue to remain on sale after 2035. We don't know the detail, but it seems inevitable, and so that will doubtless get picked up by some commentators over here as well, and they'll say, "Oh well, there's not going to be a ban on ICE after all." But we're still sitting here with the ZEV mandate ramping up, 28, 35, percent, and the right answer always was, but particularly now is, for the people for whom a BEV works, then that's what they should buy. But we shouldn't end up in a situation where, customers are being coerced into one, or in my view, that, there's big chunks of public money, going into incentivizing it, or dealers, get penalized for not hitting, certain EV targets to support that ZEV mandate target. It needs to be the customer and the market and the supply of good product that drives the mix.
Well, as always, it's. That was just a few minutes of the longer sort of half an hour chat there with Steve, and thinking about that budget and digging into it a little bit and sort of bringing it to life in terms of what it means for him as a dealer and more importantly the wider automotive sector.
Yeah, because he does go on to talk about the impact on consumers, and I mean, it's a fascinating chat with him because obviously he's wearing his ICDP hat, but he's also a retailer himself, so he can see it from both sides.
Yeah. So sticking with the budget, and a few stories here that do overlap a little bit, but heading over first to car dealer, and this is the new pay per mile tax could see 440,000 fewer EV sales over the next 5 years, according to the OBR. Now, I believe that was very quickly revised. Not a good week for the OBR, I don't think, but they shortly revised that figure and said that they got the calculation wrong, and I think it was just over 150,000 or thereabouts. So that figure has come down. So yeah, they not only released the budget half an hour before Rachel Reeves stood up to announce the budget, they also got some of their calculations wrong. But we won't go there.
So, someone's very quick at the OBR to press the send key, aren't they? I mean,
Seems to be.
That's a hell of a difference. 440,000 down to what did you say? 100
odd, I think. Yeah, I can't remember the exact calculation in the end, but I think Rachel Reeves is also challenging their forecast as well. They're saying that they've got their forecasts incorrect and that she has them correct. So we'll see. But I think essentially this is this is the introduction of the pence per mile, which is 3 pence on an EV. And 1.5 pence for a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. Now, obviously, we did touch on that a little bit with Steve, that the sector knew that there was a tax coming. There had to be a tax coming for battery electric vehicles. It was the question of how they were going to introduce it. I think that is still a little bit up in the air as to how this is going to be managed to calculate how much tax people do pay on their mileage for a EV and a plug-in hybrid.
Yes, and it is. It's out to consultation, isn't it? So they're hopefully they'll listen to the industry on this one because it does need a lot of input from the industry. And I think the deadline's been set until March next year before they release how it's going to be done. But one of the things I thought about was, I mean, it doesn't affect everyone, but if you take your car abroad. You've got an EV, you take it abroad on holiday. How's that calculated? Yeah, and why should that be applicable for road tax back or fuel tax back in the UK?
Yeah.
I'm sure that's on someone's list. You'd like to think it would be.
I think there's a long list of questions of how this is going to be implemented. I know I saw something on the BBC this week, and it was, well, we'll check it with the MOT, and it was like, the MOT is not due till 3 years. What do you do for the first 3 years of the vehicle's life? Well, we'll check it on the MOT. And it was like, no, the MOT isn't due until the first 3 years of it. It's after 3 years. So what do you do for the first 3 years? So there's lots of, but I think, reality is, I think that the government is trying to say, this is the intent, this is the process that we are looking to implement. Now we're going to consultation of how this will be managed and how we implement it. I think the challenge with this at the minute, and this is the thing we touched with Steve, is what does this do in terms of consumer attitude towards electric vehicles in the meantime? Because, it is 3 years off, as we know. So it is, it's not coming in immediately, and which is similar to a lot of the announcements in this week's budget. They are back end weighted, aren't they?
Yeah, that was one of the things that really stood out with this budget. That a lot of it is, as you say, back end weighted. So not necessarily to be seen over the course of even this parliament. Some of it could be in the next parliament, if at all.
Yeah, and in the story there is a few things here from like the AA, for argument's sake. So the AA uniquely placed to assist government in designing a fair and transparent system. The challenge is clear. It must be simple, trusted, and equitable to all road users. And saying that other considerations like appointing a truly independent body to determine the rates would help give confidence to drivers and improve the level of trust in the system. So there's lots of questions out there. However, we knew tax was coming on EVs, and obviously it has, and the intention is there. And alongside that, and again, you touched on it with Steve, didn't you, that expensive car supplement has been raised from 40,000 now to 50,000, which was always question in the first place, wasn't it?
We were scratching our head when that one was first announced, because £40,000 brought a lot of new EVs into the expensive car supplement where they shouldn't have been.
Yeah, and the other story is in Motor Trade News, which is much of the same, and there's a few commentators, including myself, on behalf of the VRA. I think we knew tax was coming for battery electric vehicles. I think it was on you touched on, Steve, the lost treasury revenue over the years as the ICE vehicle volume has started to decline. It's more hybrid and plug-in hybrid, and EVs enter the market. There's lots of revenue deficit there for the government. So I think we knew it was coming. I think it is just a case of how it will be managed going forward.
Yeah, most definitely. And staying with Motor Trade News, and the headline there is a Motor and JQ to offer 20,000 mile EV tax rebate. So this is a Motor and JQ being really quick out of the blocks, because this was announced the day after the budget. So they've actually come up with a really good scheme because to counter this pay per mile. So the rebates they're talking about is which will be giving to its retail customers savings equivalent to 20,000 miles of driving at 3p per mile. And the rebate is intended to reduce lifetime ownership costs for EV customers. Following those budget announcements that EV drivers will be taxed at 3p a mile. And although the tax is not scheduled to begin until 2028, and I think this is one of the particularly clever bits about this scheme, a Motor and JQ will offer the rebate immediately on vehicles purchased within a 48-month finance term. So they've tied it in with finance. Some really, really quick thinking here, because we didn't know the precise details. We knew there'd be a pay per mile. We didn't know exactly what it was going to be, but that they obviously did a calculus on all the variables and have delivered this scheme, and hats off to them.
Yeah, and I think there's probably more going to follow on this in the ahead of it, just to alleviate that concern from consumers around the ownership of a battery electric vehicle or a hybrid, which, as we know, particularly from the Chinese new entrants, is really their makeup of models and drivetrains.
Because I think for a lot of consumers, all they will hear is, oh, well, we're facing 3p a mile on a new EV. They don't necessarily know that it's not coming in immediately.
Exactly.
So they're already sort of disengaging. So a Motor and JQ, what a great scheme they've thought to address that.
And one good thing that did really come out, and this is, and again, we touched on it with Steve Young, and testament to the sector and the associations and others that really lobbied against this, along with the SMMT, with the government, which is the ECOS scheme, which is the employee car ownership scheme, which was set to come into effect and become benefit in kind in the 6th of October 2026, which was already delayed from the 6th of April 2026. Well, this is now being significantly delayed and kicked down the road. That they are saying that it's still going to come into effect, but I think, is it 2029, 2030 or something like that? I think, is it now going forward?
I think it's April 2030 that they're thinking about introducing it now. So yeah, as you say, it's been kicked down the road. And in terms of U-turns, you're absolutely right. This was a very welcome one, because as we've spoken about on the podcast before, these schemes generate a lot of nearly new cars, which then go into the used car market, and the shortfall was going to be quite considerable if these schemes were to be stopped. And it's also worth adding that it sounds as though the government was listening to the lobbying activities of the industry, very much led by the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders and the National Franchise Dealers Association. So that's kind of encouraging that if they are receptive to what the industry is actually saying.
No, and I think it is positive. I think, as we move into what we touched on before and that pence per mile, that it is going into quite a long consultation for the government really on that one. That they are actually now listening to the sector and the lobbying and so hopefully, on the back of the ECOS scheme that more will come from that one going forward. But again, and more government intervention and involvement in the automotive sector. And again, we touched on it a couple of times because there was lots of news around it, particularly with it being about the Motability scheme here in the UK. And the BBC News has covered it this week, saying that premium cars like BMW and Mercedes cut from Motability scheme. And this is saying that the disabled people who have a car through the Motability scheme will no longer be allowed premium vehicles such as BMW and Mercedes. And that's alongside Audi, Lexus and Alfa Romeo that have also been removed from the scheme with immediate effect, from what I understand. And that's alongside coupes and convertibles from all manufacturers are now looking either immediately or intended to be removed from the scheme as well. So significant changes to that scheme that many of my age and time in the industry have seen through the decades of how the Motability scheme has worked for the market.
Yeah, and tying in with this, and this was all clarified as part of some of the budget announcements, Motability said the change would be made with immediate effect, as it announced a new ambition for half the cars it leases to be British built by 2035.
That's a big question.
So this means the likes of Nissan, Vauxhall, Toyota, probably not Jaguar Land Rover.
No.
But my question on this scheme is that, okay, these luxury brands have been excluded, but I think some of the coverage of this sort of implies that anyone on a Motability scheme was running around in luxury cars, but you actually had to pay a top-up premium to access BMWs, Mercedes, etc. So it does kind of question how many Motability users, and these are disabled people and their carers, were running around in what are termed luxury cars. I doubt it was that high.
No, I think this is the bit that, as you say, the perception of it and the lack of understanding is that you only get your disability allowance as it's a single fee. It's a fixed fee that you get.
Yeah.
That can be given in to take a vehicle instead, but that only accounts for a proportion of the purchase. And if you do want a certain vehicle, then you pay as part of your deposit contribution towards that.
Yeah.
It is essentially a lease. It's a 3-year lease that you're entering into with Motability, but using your disability allowance to do it. So I think there's a misconception. I think the bit that with this is, those brands that we mentioned are, in general, reasonably low volume for the entire volume of Motability. So, let's not be clear that people buying a Mercedes, BMW, and Audi, Lexus, and Alfa through the scheme, in terms of its overall volume, compared to the Peugeots or Lexus, Nissan, the Peugeots and the Citroens and the Nissan and Vauxhall, etc., a low volume.
Yeah.
However, an unintended consequence of this is there will potentially job losses with this, because there will be Motability specialists within those franchises that are employed to look after the Motability scheme on behalf of those dealers.
Yes, yeah, good point.
Then towards a question as to that, and they do count towards target. So I think there is a lot to come from this. They've also, insurance premium tax is now going to be added, so that again will move a lot of cars further out of reach for some customers. And they're talking about adding VAT to the advance payment as well, which again will take some products away from consumers that they would normally be able to get into. So there's a lot to come from this, but I don't think on the bigger scheme of things it's as bad as some of the media have made out.
We'll be back shortly with the rest of the week's headlines after this.
You're listening to All the Chatter That Matters on Motor Trade Radio, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media. Available on demand, wherever you are, on your podcast feed. Next up is car retailing industry guru Ian Godbold, sharing his top tips on how to steer your business to success.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this month's top tip. Well, here we are, the final weekend of November and only days away from the 1st of December. So it feels right to introduce a festive theme. Many of you in marketing will be preparing for Automotive Whamageddon. No, it's not when Wham's Last Christmas first plays, but when a dealer says, it's gone quiet. Every year, the time just after Black Friday brings a touch of dealer amnesia, overlooking the simple truth that consumers are not vanishing, but turning their attention to Christmas shopping and festive plans. High street retailers have long understood this shift, and Black Friday itself later came to mark something positive for them, the moment their accounts moved from in the red to in the black. At this time, there are several areas worth reviewing and acting upon. This time of year often leads to marketing teams freezing into paralysis by analysis, trying to justify the seasonal dip, followed by an instinctive move to increase PPC budgets in an attempt to chase a softer market. Yet there are far more constructive and proactive steps that can be taken. Begin by reviewing your Google PPC campaigns. Ensure cost per click is reduced, not by chasing a colder market, but by running the account more intelligently. Challenge your agency. Do not allow them to take the easy route and simply let the account tick along. Examine your more expensive marketplaces. This may be the ideal month to reduce stock levels and secure a cost saving. Now is a moment to return to the fundamentals. Finance renewals. Let's make sure all renewal opportunities are contacted. Leads. Review all leads in your CRM system for the past 6 weeks. Establish whether the customer has already purchased or remains in market. Follow up every part exchange request. There's always intent behind a valuation inquiry. Service to sales. Provide a valuation on every vehicle entering the service bay. The car may be worth more than the customer expects and could present an acquisition opportunity ahead of the busier January period. Contact all service customers 72 hours before their visit to offer a test drive for a new model, particularly if you represent one of the newer Chinese brands, as many customers will not yet have experienced their excellent features and competitive pricing. So although we're entering the festive period, there's still plenty to pursue while preparing for the market uplift and sales activity from the 26th of December onwards. If you need support with any points mentioned, or if you just like to report the first dealer to fall into Automotive Whamageddon, you can reach me at Ian Godbold at igcdigital.co.uk or hit the comments below in LinkedIn. Have a great week and stay busy during the festive period.
Whamageddon.
Yeah, well, I really hope Ian's trademarks that.
He needs to, doesn't he? He does definitely need to.
Yeah. I never had him down as a Wham fan. I thought he was more sort of indie rock.
Be careful what you wish for. You might get something off of his next his top tips. You might get a bit of what is it, Last Christmas or whatever it is. So we'll see. But I think some good advice as always there in a very short snippet with Ian there. And as you said, if you do need anything, please do reach out to Ian. Now, just the last couple of stories for this week, because it was obviously, mainly focused on the outcome of the budget. An update on the latest from Cap HPI on their November going into December figures. Now, Car Dealer have reported on that this week, saying used car market is outperforming expectations despite a dip in trade values, saying that the used car trade prices fell by 1.9% of that 3-year 60 point, or equivalent to an average of £350. Pure electric were the fastest selling used cars in November, but the result reported by CAP HPI is in line with normal seasonal expectations. So nothing too bad coming out of the movements this month.
Yeah, and I think the key to this story is that this is in line with seasonal normality. So nothing really much to see here. The CAP HBI say that every November to December movement has recorded a decrease in values with no rises on record. So I mean, it just shows how normal that is, with 2025 actually continuing to outperform expectations. So if you would like to know more on the CAP HBI editorial for this year, all the for this month rather, all the details and a link will be in the newsletter that we publish on Monday.
Yeah, definitely. And last couple of quick stories is the as we touched on with Steve on the wider interview this week, was that in AM Online, Van Mossel breaks into AM100 after double acquisition on the south coast, and this is that the worst kept secret in the UK automotive sector was that Van Mossel, who we'll know as the acquisition of the Jackson's business last year, I think, if I get that right, there in the Channel Islands, has bought Breeze Motor Group and Ocean Automotive, which are two VW businesses down on the south coast there, across Portsmouth, Southampton, Bournemouth, Poole, Wimborne and Yeovil. Probably more your neck of the woods down that way, is it?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, a couple of great acquisitions here. They're contiguous territories, as you say, because Breeze Motor Group based in Southampton, Ocean Automotive based in Poole. A couple of great acquisitions, and Van Mossel's first acquisitions on, if we can call it, mainland England, because as you say, they'd previously bought Jackson's Group in the Channel Islands, and the operations in Isle of Man and Isle of Wight. But the huge Dutch group. They're one of the biggest groups in the top 50 that we talked about with Steve. And as a statement of intent, this is quite clear. They are interested in growing both in Europe, continental Europe, but specifically in UK, and a couple of great purchases here to really help them on their way. The day after this was announced, they also announced who will be leading their UK operations. So AM reported on this with the headline, Chief Exec appointed for Van Mossel's UK dealer group. So the Chief Exec appointed to head UK operations of Van Mossel will be Andrew Lean. Now, Andrew will be familiar to a lot of listeners because he gained considerable experience in his 25 years in motor retail because he headed up the large Volkswagen division of Marshall Motor Group for almost 9 years until the start of this year. So, a welcome pair of safe hands there to lead Van Mossel's expansion in the UK.
Yeah, definitely. And again, just referring back to the interview there with Steve, Van Mossel is very well known for their leasing side of their operations, based out of the Netherlands and across Europe there. And I think, from what I understand, they've got some big intent for the UK. They do want to become one of the top 5 UK dealer groups very quickly. So I think this is we knew that when they'd taken on the Jackson's operation, that was their first step to try and get into the UK market. And this, I think, is the first of many that's probably on the horizon for Van Mossel in the UK, and particularly appointing Andrew there to head it up. He will want more operations to run here in the the UK. So I think I expect to hear a little bit more from that in the future. But that's it for this week. So lots to cover, lots going on in terms of the budget. I think in many ways it's still early days. There's still a lot of people picking through the detail behind the announcement of the budget. I think you and I were very clear, and Steve the same. It was kind of all back end weighted, nothing too bad. A lot of consultation going on there, and a lot of people will be digging into what that means for the sector. Do check out the full interview there with Steve Young from ICDP. And as he said there, you can, on the interview with Steve, you can go onto the ICDP website and get a copy of the top 50 European dealer group report from the website. So if you are interested in a bit more detail than what we covered with Steve, then you can get a copy of the report on the website.
But you know what, Phil? That's all for now. So many thanks for joining us on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Thank you for listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. We'll be sharing all the URLs from this week's headlines on Monday morning. To make sure you receive them, just subscribe to the free newsletter on our LinkedIn page. Just search Motor Trade Radio Podcast.